Forrihinger. Moved Councillor Stoltz, seconded Councillor Forrihinger, that the minutes of the 13th of June be signed as a true and correct record. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Contrary carried. Thank you. And we have a schedule of action sheet. Did you wish to comment on the first two items, Mr. Zaman?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just in relation to the first item in terms of after our stock control service funding allocation, that's tracking as per noted in the action. Staff are monitoring costings. It started this financial year. At the end of the financial year, there will be actually a report of how the money's been spent and some recommendations for that, which will go to the annual report. I note item 2, that's actually covered on the agenda.
Yes, no, it's fine. Thank you. Does anyone else have anything they wish to raise from the action sheet? No, thank you. So those points are noted, and we move to the governance work plan. Any comment with respect to the page 13, which is progress as usual? Thank you. So the next item is on page 16, the draft stock control bylaw. Is someone going to speak? Thank you very much. Right. I think we've all read it. We all know what's going on. So we'll take questions first. Thank you, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, just I wasn't sure in the recommendations the difference between 2C and 2D. Determines that a bylaw is the most appropriate way of addressing the issues around stock control. D determines that a bylaw is the most appropriate form.
Council officers, would you like to make any comment on that? Probably there's no difference.
They're very similar. I think it relates to the actual wording in the legislation in the Local Government Act and just being extra careful that we've ticked every box that we need to legally.
I would have thought B would have, or C would have done that.
There's 3 points we have to meet, and that wording in the recommendations reflects the wording in the legislation. So there is sort of some overlap and repetition, but they are decisions you need to make.
Councillor Stoltz.
Thank you. I'm very happy to move this paper. Councillor Seymour and myself sat on this hearing, and we were happy to move it in 2017. So I'm very happy that there are no material differences. I don't see the need, like you've indicated in the paper, for extensive public consultation as we did it in 2017. So I'm very happy to move all the recommendations A, B, C, D, even though there's a bit of an overlap there with C and D. You assured us that's just to have the proper wording to tick all the boxes. And thank you for that.
Is there a seconder, please? Thank you, Councillor Forrihinger. Sorry, I just want to reiterate the point made by Councillor Stoltz that it's not strong in the recommendation, but it is mentioned within the body of the report, so that the public is really clear that there is no change from the hearing. That while there was a public consultation process, there was also a hearing. And while 3 people, as the body of the report notes, attended, there were a number of other submissions over and above, and that's briefly being covered by Councillor Stoltz. But we need to make it really clear that a full process was undertaken, and it would have been in place by now were it not to have been questioned about our legality of putting in a bylaw on a state highway. So we've got over that. Thank you. Any further questions with respect to the paper? No, so thank you. We have it moved by Councillor Stoltz, seconded by Councillor Forrihinger. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thanks very much. That's great that after all that time and additional effort put in by council officers, you can now apply yourself to something else. What a big paper on the agenda today is the Waianaki Pest Control Report at page 36. Thank you. Mr. Karaitiana going to speak to it. Good afternoon. Right, welcome, Ms. Sheetham, who's our reporting officer, with respect to the paper, so thank you very much. And obviously, Mr. Karatiana. Are there questions? Because again, this is a report on an item that was significantly funded, and it's pity Councillor Dunn isn't here because she, along with myself, are one of the advocates for a substantial sum of money being put into pest control in that area. Did she?
At 12:59.
Okay, so we'll note Councillor Dunn and we'll come back to that. Thank you, Councillor Stoltz. Is there any question? Thank you, Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, how have the possum been extraordinarily clever over the last year? The number of possum trapped compared to, I mean, when you go through the paper, there is a real possum problem there, and the possum number in that trapping is very, very low. So,
The type of trap we're using at currently is specifically for the smaller pest animals, mustelids, rats. Possums are not meant to be caught in there, but we are catching the odd ones. So the number at 4 doesn't really reflect the rest of the population that's there. So we're not specifically targeting possums at this stage. We are catching the odd ones in the box trap.
the map on page 64, I think it is, where you've got that perimeter trapping, it's that more specifically to possums, isn't it?
That's more specifically for mustelids and rats.
Oh,
around the
still?
perimeter. Yep.
Yeah.
So we've done virtually 3/4 of the perimeter.
Yeah.
What we've got in place at the moment is regarding possums, is we've completed the circuit similar to the mustelid box traps. We've set possum bait stations in place right around the perimeter, similar to the box traps. We've been pre-feeding those for the last 8 days, and we're wanting to put the toxin in on Monday morning for possums.
Okay. Yeah, I was quite happy to see that perimeter mapping, because I'm quite aware of what's happening down the South Island and all the trials I've been doing down there. I mean, in Queen Charlotte, it was very successful. They had the advantage of having the sea on one side, so they could sort of make this fence of them, and it seemed to be a lot more successful way of getting on top of it, because otherwise they just keep coming in. So, yeah.
Can I ask a supplementary question to that? When resources going out there, because it's not just around the corner, why are we not doing possum control at the same time as we're putting out traps and mustelids? And second part of that question, to what benefit do you think the trapping on the boundary between ourselves and Hawke's Bay, which has had quite a lot of resource, will have impacted on the possums in that area?
Yeah, I think we're wanting to be consistent with Hawke's Bay to make sure that we're doing complementary work on our boundary as well, rather than us being seen as an exacerbator to contribute to some of the more ongoing possum work in the area.
But do you think that the work we've done on that boundary, which was the first priority in our pest plan, has benefited? It should have taken away some of the possums that have found their way into here ultimately, shouldn't it?
Certainly. So we've done the initial knockdown in the monitor blocks. What we're actually doing at the moment is ensuring through a quarterly baiting process was to make sure we didn't get any re-invasion. So what we're actually looking at doing now is to, rather than a quarterly, maybe between 4 and 6 monthly rotation, checking and baiting as needed.
And why don't we, just a question, it might be a very good reason, why did we not do possum control at the same time as we did rats and mustelids when this is an extensive area to get around?
Yeah, I think it does come back to the resources. A lot of our focus was on possums. If we look at the Wainiki work, it's a combination of all pest species, whereas our Hawke's Bay was mainly around focusing on possum control.
Thank you. And a supplementary, I don't see deer mentioned at all in here. I may have missed it, but if I recall the photographs that we were shown when we agreed to embark on this process, that the deer were seen to be browsing in the same way as goats within this Waterworks bush. And why are we not having the professional shooters shoot deer as well as goats?
I think probably how I see it is that culling deer and goats is a specialist control type work. And we have, working in partnership with our Department of Conservation, is currently they're doing the goat control within the reserve. I'm sure Mel may have a bit of an idea of the plot implementation they wanted to do for vegetation plots throughout the Wainaki bush will give us indication as to how prevalent the deer are. We know there's certainly deer there, but certainly they'll give us an indication by the ground vegetation browsing as to what ungulates and the pressure they're putting on that understory. So certainly deer and goats, we within our team focus purely on what we're able to achieve within the resource we've got at the moment. I'm sure goats and deer are certainly in the mix there, but I think for us at the moment, it's probably one of those ones where we need to get on with some of the core delivery of what we set out to do, which was our possum work, followed, and certainly with our the pest predator control as well.
Thank you. Can I just persist a little? At 11 on page 38, we do talk about what the dog hunters have shot, and they've done 191 goats. And that's an increase of 128 goats. I mean, we are working in partnership with DOC, and I just can't really understand why we aren't asking DOC to shoot deer as well, because deer are known to be spreading across our pastoral farmland, and they'll be inhabiting here. We can shoot all the goats we like, but if we're happy to have deer, and I'm sure DOC would be cooperative, their professional hunters could be invited to shoot deer as well. I mean, that's what we should be doing, working together to get the best use of the resource that's available.
And I think I would need to think that we need to have that conversation with Ngāi Tamanui as the, some of the kaitiaki for that area there, but also they see it as a resource for food. So that's another conversation we need to have with Ngāi Tamanui about deer and pigs in particular. Certainly at this early stage of implementing this work plan is we've got to focus on what we're able to do, certainly within the timeframes we've got. So this first year is mainly setting up our perimeter buffers, but also looking at internally dealing with the possums and mustelids internally as well. So yeah, I think it's a conversation we could have with DOC regarding goat control as well as deer control as well as goats.
That would be fantastic. Thank you very much. Councillor Stoltz.
Thanks for a great report, lots of information in here, Phil. I want to ask you something on page 38.11, where at this stage we are harvesting in Pamoa, and it pushes, you indicate here that it's mostly talking about goats here, but pushing some of the goats into the Wainaki water area, which is great because it means they're more condensed in a small area. But you talk there about we really need to take a good look at a collaborative Pamoa Wainaki buffer control program. And I assume staff will be onto it with us moving into our Pamoa second rotation planting, that we make sure that this is all tied up and together, and we do have a collaborative plan that ties in with that second rotation planting.
And I think that's certainly something we're working with the biodiversity group.
Yes.
Ensuring that we're not only Wainaki itself, but
yes,
Pamoa as well. So
make sure it's all tied together. Thank you.
Councillor Cranston.
Yeah, the other thing I'm aware of is, because there's a lot of beach up there, the way the rat and mice population goes with and I think it's about every 3 or 4 years where it just goes ballistic. And are we able to predict those seasons ahead, and do we do anything different in a year where we just know that population is just going to go through the roof at that time?
it's expected the rat populations will be quite high, not only through this particular Wainaki bush, but also generally throughout New Zealand. So the sort of poison we're using at the moment is a toxin that actually kills rats as well as possums. So we expect the first possum toxic lines to go out, that the rats will certainly give those a fair bit of a thrashing. So we're anticipating a second dose of Ferrocol product to deal with rats, but also the possums as well. So you're correct, we probably can expect quite an infestation of rats interfering with our poison lines.
Thank you. Councillor, any further questions? Councillor Stoltz moved and Councillor Corrigan seconded. Thank you very much for the report. It is really useful and interesting. I'll put that to the meeting. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thank you. So the next one is the review of toxins for pigeon populations, and that is on page 65. Thank you, Mr. Cave. Pigeon control has become an interesting element. We've read the report, so what else would you like to tell us? Or would you just like to answer questions?
I think for us, myself, it's been an interesting exercise. I mean, it does open up the views of other than conventional tools, what else can you actually use? And yeah, it's interesting to note that somebody else has spent a fair bit of time looking elsewhere and has come up with an alternative option. And I think it's probably something that should be looked at other than the conventional tools. But I think certainly having a mix would probably go well to supporting the other option of pigeon roosts.
But birds being birds and pigeons being feral birds, aren't they just going to go and lay some more eggs the minute you've taken the ones out of the nest?
They probably will.
How many
Birds
times
being
are you
birds.
climbing up on the roof?
If you like, I can possibly help a wee bit here. Any one solution is only part of it. We have to have an integrated approach for it to work. It's embarrassing that the fact there's remarkably little scientific research on the control of feral pigeons. And with respect to the roosting box, it was tried in one particular city, and the scientific analysis of that doesn't really back up the anecdotal data that is floating around, and it indicates that it works for a while and then that method drops off in effectiveness. And the principal reason is because it's actually very resource hungry on people going up and collecting the eggs, and people just get sick of it fundamentally, or bored or whatever else. So that is one solution. One of the more effective solutions within the urban environment is in actual fact mechanical means of stopping the pigeons from roosting in those particular places. Acoustic methods don't work, so it's things that stop them from perching, wires that stop them from flying in. Those type of methods work quite well. But just judging from what we've had happen with one recreational shooter at the wrong time of the year out in the rural sector, that does seem to be like a very effective means of knocking back feral pigeon populations, at least in the short term. And that's actually quite useful piece of information to know.
Other questions to this report?
Question out of interest, where you talk about the toxin DCR 1339 and you need a specific person. My understanding is that there's only one person with that license in our community. Is that the truth?
I can't answer that. There could be. I'm not too sure. But you're quite right. You need to be hold a controlled substance license to apply that particular toxin.
Thank you.
Right. Are there any further questions? If not, the report is for information. Is there someone prepared to move? Moved, Councillor Cranston. Seconded, Councillor Fenn. Thank you, gentlemen. All those in favour, please say aye. Contrary, carried. Thanks very much. So we move to the pest management plan, the operational report on page 70. Thank you. Other questions of this report? I've got a few, so while others are finding their page. Another one of my pet weeds, pampas, and I'd like to know what we're doing about weed control on the Makarori Okatū headland, when there was a pest and weed control program going there for quite some time, but we seem to have stopped weed control on that headland in the absence of funds while we concentrate on other areas of the city. And because that was funded by bequests, I just wondered when we proposed to put Makarori Oaktree Headland, where Pampas is becoming established again, what plan do we have for that, please?
It's certainly an area that we can put our staff resources in there to pick up where some of the work has been done in the past. And just with regard to Pampas, certainly I have to give credit to our Tidal Artery Roads and NZTA for the support they've given us in our first operational plan in dealing with Pampas on our highways and some of our council roads as well. So a fair bit of work has gone into in the past year on this high-profile plant such as Pampas, but certainly some of our reserve work, now that we're working in quite close collaboration with livable communities, we can actually see where we can actually, as a collective, put a bit more effort into and resources into the likes of Markawardi Reserve.
Thank you. And perhaps for your notes, there are 9 plants between Puawa and Makarori on the beachfront. And so I would think our beach reserves should be high profile for removing those. Thank you. And the other question I had is under 8, a small, with respect to rocks, which we know are a pest that we want to get rid of. And I was just disappointed to read that the control of rocks near Te Puia was unsuccessful due to late operational timing. And rock control is something that this council's been involved in forever. So we should have the timing accurate, should we? And what are we going to do this year?
You're correct. Our guys are up there today. They're heading up to the coast. They want last rock that the suspect one's still there up at along East Cape, and they're up at around Te Puia. They were up there this morning. So we're on track to do the initial monitoring, and also we're certainly on track to actually do the elimination. Yep.
And could we ask for a report next month, because that should be at the next, which is 6 weeks, EMP meeting, as to what the capture rate was or the destruction rate of rocks is, because they used to be to the west and you've managed to eliminate them from there, so it would be good to eliminate them on the coast as well. Just on rocks. That'd be great. I think I'm really keen about the weeds and pests. Thank you, Councillor Stoltz. I can tell you the question.
I'll just make a little observation, and I'm happy to move this paper. I walk up Te Rangamounga 2-3 times a week, and you can definitely see the pest control happening up there. It's really, really impressive. I'm sure come purple Sinisio time we'll be a bit more happy this year, but you guys have done, and your team of ladies there have really, really done an awesome job. And I'm happy to move this paper. Thank you.
Councillor Wharehenga?
I'm happy to second. I also do want to mention Titirangi as well, from that the compliments that have been shared with me have been from external people that have been visiting our area, and also the hosts of people that have been taking those visitors up Titirangi. They've commented on how great it looks. So I do want to acknowledge the team, and also our 2 young ladies, Mihi and Jordan, in regards to the mahi that they're doing up there. It'll actually be great to have them actually engage with come say hi to our community, because we do see a lot, say hi to our committee, because we do see a lot of them out in the community and stuff, and they do a really good job of kind of building, I guess, momentum in around and behind Titirangi. Great to see that we've made good gains there. I was wanting to know something that I've brought up previously. Is there any plans to incorporate the whole plant pest management stuff, particularly in regards to Sinisio, and combine that with the Mount Everest challenge that people kind of do up and over Titirangi? It's something that I've brought up in here, but also something that people from the community have brought up.
Can they pull out a plant?
Yeah, well, I don't know what that may or may not look like. And yeah, just whether or not we're going up there, I'm not too sure. Have there been any conversations progressed with Sports Gisborne in regards to that?
Council officers able to answer that?
Through the chair, I think that appreciation of the Whai Titirangi program is great, and that is part of your investment in the Titirangi Maunga restoration. So the biosecurity function has a role in that. The girls report through there, but it is actually your restoration project that funds all of that work. Yeah, it has come up in the past around some of the weeds on the side of the road. There's actually nothing to stop people from actually pulling those, you know, whether it's the wilding pines or whatever, pulling those. The issue is probably, is there a receptacle for those weeds at the top of the maunga, and actually that's not a difficult issue to sort out. In terms of using the Titirangi Challenge as a means to get further into the weed control on the maunga, that's probably a more difficult question, given that actually I think you've got to walk up the maunga 7 times a week or something to actually get to the top of Everest, and that's quite a big ask just on its own.
Thank you.
I'll just supplementary. Yeah, absolutely acknowledge that the stuff that people walking up and down Titirangi is a big mahi in and of its own, involved in a lot of groups that that contribute to that challenge, and the conversations is actually coming out of those groups in regards to helping us target the plant pest control stuff with Titirangi. I did note that I overheard my colleague Councillor Cranston say that he has brought it up with Sports Gisborne. I'll be stoked to hear that if you're able to share that, Councillor Cranston.
Thank you.
Yeah, we, at our last meeting in Sport Gisborne, we did bring that up, and the intention was for Sport Gisborne to come and get their heads around with council and decide on a strategy for that. I don't think it's as easy as people just pulling out the weeds, because there's all that, not everyone knows what a senecio is, not everyone knows what a wilding pine is. So I think there just needs to be an element of education about what they can pull out. And yeah, perhaps you could, I thought that contact had been made between Sport Gisborne and council, because it's quite a while ago now that we did bring it up, and the intention of Sport Gisborne was, okay, let's get our heads around, see if there is a feasible way of doing this.
Thank you. Good. So that, any further questions with respect to that paper? No? Thank you. So that report has been moved by Councillor Stoltz and seconded by Councillor Forringer. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. So the next item is the National Policy Statement for Urban Development Capacity and Market Indicators Report, which is, yes, it's on page 74, and it is gathering together of data, which once upon a time used to go to community development, and once upon a time went to the economic development. It's just moved around a bit, and it's historical data, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a national policy statement made under the Resource Management Act, hence why we're reporting to EP&R. So previously, and under the current document, we are supposed to report quarterly. However, central government agreed with the medium-sized councils that we could provide an annual report, because the quarterly reports weren't really providing much useful information to anyone. The annual report is maybe not that much more useful either, but at least we don't have to report so often. The MPS is currently under review, just to note that, so there may be changes in monitoring requirements yet to come. We have also had some work done by Market Economics that is touched on in this report. Unfortunately, their draft report wasn't sort of in a finished enough format to get to this committee, but that report looks at the long-term capacity we have in terms of zoned land for both residential and commercial use. And the outcomes of that work is that there is sufficient land. The real key is unlocking that land, which is a trickier issue.
And I just have one question, which you might answer at the same time as Noble, which is on the consents and residential, and I was surprised to see it said in this report a 21% decrease in the total number of new dwellings consented. And Mr. Zaman and I had a discussion about that the other day.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Part of it is when the report actually takes place, calendar year against financial year. I've got Mr. Ian Petty with us, who may be able to elaborate and give the committee a bit of a broader explanation.
Happy to hold the question, shall we do that? Thank you, Mr. Petty.
So it's essentially a frame of reference issue that if you're looking at financial years, you get a different trend than if you do it calendar years. And the main reason for that is the beginning of 2018, the first half of 2018, that number in a quarter, so just a very low first half of 2018, over the longer half of the different results. So the issue, for the year just finished.
So you can see us, yes?
So the issue, 103 new vacancies for
And that's
the
for-
year ending in June, so which is a lot different than the 2018.
Do you think there was any impact of the global financial crisis, if that was the first quarter of 2008? Was there any implication from the global financial crisis in people's mindsets that we were so slow in the beginning of 2018? It's a long time afterwards.
I'm not sure. I mean, as building consents are generally trending upwards, even with renovations and major work, and it's as people get more equity in their houses, they extend themselves. There does seem to be a bit of shortage of subdivided land in these guys. So we're getting a few more input. But it is, things are buoyant at the moment. There's a lot of new developments going on. That's something new developments going on out there. We're moving along.
Yes, no, that's fine. It just seemed it did seem an unusual figure, but it's quite clearly new dwellings. It says it's not renovations. So, but thanks.
No,
It's interesting information that you've given us. Thank you.
If you look at the overall trend for all building consents, we did $102 million worth of work last year, and that reflects the bigger jobs that are getting done rather than install solid fuel heater and things like that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Seaman. I'll just add to what Mr. Petty has said. If you actually look at the trend in terms of the number of building consents overall and not just for new dwellings, there is quite a, you can see a market increase over the last few years, and we have reported that back to committee in the past committees that they are tracking up quite. It's the data, how you look at it, and a snapshot of that data. But we have seen, and I think Ian has produced a graph for me of quite an increased trend in terms of the number of building consents that we're getting through.
No, that's great. I wasn't suggesting it was a reference, any reflection on our department. It just was an odd figure. Councillor Stoltz?
Just I have two questions, Joe, on the background bit where it states the NPS and requires council. The NPS requires council. NPS is administered by MB. It's all requiring council to do stuff. What was our input into the changes that is happening to the NPS or the work that is happening? I couldn't remember, did we do formal submissions or are they working with us? Because our needs in the regions are quite different from the needs in the city. So I would hope that they also get a regional voice and not just the city voice.
So we were invited to attend a workshop in Wellington I think it was last month or the month before, where central government provided a bit of an overview of the new changes. They haven't actually been released yet, so we haven't yet had an opportunity to participate. I believe they are imminent.
Because the question's a good one. I'll come to you in 2 seconds. Councillor Stoltz, because we actually haven't had the NPS reported to council, I don't think, because it's not been finalised. So once it is, we should have it on the agenda. I mean, we heard so much about other ones, like forestry and various bits and bobs, but we haven't had that NPS reported to council, I don't think, or we would have been more aware of it.
We can, depending on timing, we might be able to report something for next month, but I'm not sure. It depends when they release the information.
Councillor Cranston?
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty interested in this report all the way through it until I got to the conclusion. I thought, well, the conclusion actually is worded in a way that wasn't what I was thinking as I was reading the report. The conclusion is that there is capacity for the development, and the numbers that we've got in front of us for demand is very, very high. So the availability is driven by supply and demand, and the demand out there is really high. So where we're doing graphs and what's actually happening with consents and that, we haven't, I don't believe, got an actual handle on what the demand is at the moment. And demand at the moment is incredibly high, you know. And to actually say that we've got the capacity to deal with that demand as it is sitting at the moment and growing, I'm just not confident that it is in the way that it's stated. I think the capacity is not there. Mr. Petty said that there's a lot of going towards in-house, but you've got to find those places, and there's not actually that much out there that can be handle that in building that. So, yeah, just the
So,
reality of
yeah.
demand, I think, is something we really need
There's
to.
two different things there. The
Yeah.
demand is sort of the immediate need for housing. The capacity is what's theoretically possible given the current land zoning. It doesn't mean that it's development ready. And that's where we have a disconnect between theoretical capacity and what people want to do now. So a big constraint, for example, is infrastructure. So if you're looking at Tarahiru block, for example, that's zoned for residential use, so there's capacity there, but it's not development ready because the infrastructure is not in place to service residential development.
Yeah, we had that at community development this morning, and there was a big map of urban potential for residential development, and a lot of that is at the moment highly used in commercial, semi-commercial, all that sort of thing. So I wouldn't call that ready because it's private ownership and all that. So if that's in that ready equation, then it's not the reality of the situation.
Exactly, and the market economics report does go into that in some more depth. Unfortunately, we couldn't get it to this committee, but there is, a real difference between capacity and development ready.
Yeah.
And that's where we have the shortfall.
So subsequent to that, which is a really good point, are we having conversations with our infrastructure crew? Because a lot of it rests on what Gisborne District Council chooses to do in its next 3 years, so that we do make some of those areas ready for development, because it's actually only the leader, whatever the nice word is, because whoever develops it needs to put the infrastructure on their own land, but we need to be able to facilitate the pickup of wastewater or the delivery of drinking water, for example. So are we talking to our infrastructure team so that's in the next LTP?
So, yeah, we're talking with them in terms of the spatial plan at the moment, which then feeds into the LTP. We're also talking with Activate Tairāwhiti because there is a bigger question around who funds infrastructure. Is it council? Is it the developer? Is it a mix? And, you know, the funding infrastructure is a big issue for the whole of New Zealand, not just Gisborne. So there are some big questions there, and we are talking.
Right, and then just to the last paragraph, I just think the last paragraph opens the question around climate change. And the very last paragraph within the conclusion, since Councillor Cranston's raised the conclusion, because while we can accept that potentially climate change and severe weather events will have those impacts, but at the minute, there's not what would seem to me land in the coastal environment that is going to be subdivided, because it says here, by reducing available development capacity. Can someone tell me what exactly that's referring to? Because our development, our space for development is less about in the area of coastal areas and more inland. So what is that referring to?
There are also potential issues around, for example, stormwater levels of service. So you design your network for a certain scenario in terms of rainfall, sea level, groundwater level. As that changes with changing climate, we might not be able to deliver the same level of service, which means we may experience more flooding as a result of rain events due to stormwater runoff and ponding. So this is really looking out to the future. At the moment, it's not having a significant impact on cities' growth. And you're right, blocks like Tarahiru, for example, are not likely to be impacted by sea level rise, for example. There may be some stormwater matters we need to manage carefully.
And hopefully those stormwater matters would be part of the discussion that Gisborne District Council will be having with its own internal team, and as you've suggested, Activate Tairāwhiti. But we wouldn't want to see those discussions be like some discussions are, take forever and we make no progress whatsoever. So can we make sure that we do keep that moving along? Because we've had it mentioned to us several times that there's no capacity to reticulate Wainui, for example, when we talk to our drainage and infrastructure team, when in fact parts of Wainui would like to be reticulated. So, we have to take a lead and make sure we make some allowances and then maybe ask who's going to help us fund them. Are there any further questions with respect to this report?
When you refer at the first level, the Riverdale area, is that the Taruheru block that we refer to for that redevelopment, the greenfield capacity? The top one says 200 single dwellings can be, and it says Riverdale. I assume that is the Taruheru block between Ryman and Cameron Road.
Yes, it includes
Thank
that
you.
area.
Any further questions for clarification? If not, the recommendation is here, 74. Do we have a mover and seconder? So the recommendation is on 75. Yes, just for noting. So is that Councillor Forrihinger and Councillor Cranston? Yep. Any further questions? No. I put that to meeting that we note the content of the report, moved and seconded by Councillor Forrihinger and Councillor Cranston. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, carried. And I've had no requests for general business or adjourned business. I didn't go through all those matters, and I apologise since I usually do that. We should move to receive the late item, the late apology from Councillor Gunn, since she did actually text it. But
I'm happy to move that as she
moved by
texted me.
Councillor Ben and seconded by Councillor Stoltz. I'll put that to the meeting. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Contrary, carried. No further business. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you, staff. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you.
Shame when we lose competent people from this organisation. And today may well be Mr. Zamet's last meeting with us as Environment Policy and Regulation. So thank you, Nick, for choosing to come to the meeting. And thank you for the time that you've spent here working across a range of departments. And we will miss your attention to detail that you have provided to this committee. So thank you very much for the time you've been here. We wish you all the best where Greenfields take you. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. Thanks a lot.